Admiral Vraxis stood at the edge of the command deck, his 6 golden eyes locked onto the swirling chaos outside the flagship's massive viewport. The void between the stars had turned into a graveyard. Dozens of shattered ships, once proud vessels of the Galactic Empire, drifted silently, their wreckage a horrifying testament to the battle unfolding around them. Vraxis gritted his teeth. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be an easy conquest, a footnote in the Empire's long history of dominations. Yet here they were, fighting like demons out of legend. "Status report," he barked, his voice echoing harshly across the bridge. "Admiral, we've lost the 7th, 8th, and 12th Assault Squadrons," the tactical officer stammered, his scales paling from emerald green to sickly white. "Enemy forces are regrouping near the orbital debris field." "That's impossible," Vraxis slammed his fist into the command rail. "They shouldn't have the strength left to regroup." The officer hesitated, then swallowed hard. "Sir, there's something else." Vraxis whipped around. "Out with it!" The bridge fell into a tense silence. Every officer on board could feel it, that creeping sensation of doom, thick and suffocating like smoke. "We intercepted a human transmission," the officer said at last, voice shaking. Their admiral was heard saying, "Our main fleet hasn't even entered the battlefield yet." For a moment, Vraxis thought he misheard. He blinked slowly, his mind struggling to wrap itself around the words. The humans hadn't committed their full strength? They were fighting back this viciously with only a fraction of their forces? A cold, alien fear gripped his heart. "No," he whispered. "That can't be right." But deep down, he knew it was. The signs were all there. The brutal hit-and-run tactics, the ferocity of their pilots, the unrelenting way they fought for every inch of space. These weren't the desperate acts of a cornered prey. These were the calculated maneuvers of a predator, one that had been playing the Empire for fools. "Order the fleet to pull back," Vraxis growled, his voice low and deadly. "Now." The helmsman hesitated. "Sir, if we retreat now, it will look like cowardice. The Council—" "To the void with the Council," Vraxis roared. "You haven't seen what I've seen today. The humans, they're not fighting to survive. They're fighting to win." Before the helmsman could respond, alarms screamed across the bridge. A new formation of human ships had just dropped out of hyperspace, sleek, black vessels bristling with weapons that made even the Empire's most advanced cruisers look outdated and slow. The tactical officer gasped. "Sir, new contacts. 70, no, 100 ships." Another burst of static-filled transmission cut across the bridge speakers. "This is Admiral Cole of the United Terran Forces," a calm, steel-edged voice said. "To the invading forces of the so-called Galactic Empire, you are ordered to surrender immediately. You have one chance." Vraxis felt his knees buckle. He caught himself on the railing, breathing hard. Around him, the bridge crew stood frozen, terror written across every face. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought Earth was a backwater world, weak and primitive. They hadn't understood that humans were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. They were warriors. And they were just getting started. The bridge lights dimmed to blood red as the ship's emergency protocols kicked in. Vraxis barely registered the flashing warnings. His mind was spinning too fast, trapped between disbelief and raw fear. He turned back to the viewport, staring out at the human fleet now surrounding them like a noose, tightening around the Empire's throat. Their ships moved with terrifying precision, a silent, coordinated dance of death. "Raise shields to maximum and prepare to break through their lines," Vraxis barked, but his voice cracked halfway through. The crew scrambled, but everyone knew it was futile. These humans weren't just better armed. They were smarter, faster, and utterly merciless. In the span of hours, they had done what no other empire had ever managed. They had broken the spirit of the undefeated galactic forces. Vraxis clenched his claws against the railing. He couldn't accept this. They were the Empire. They were supposed to be the masters of the galaxy, not humiliated by a species barely 3 centuries into spaceflight. A junior officer, voice trembling, said, "Sir, incoming transmission again." "Put it through," Vraxis said, his mouth dry. Admiral Cole's face appeared on the main screen, a man in his late 40s, with cold gray eyes and a scar running down his cheek. His expression was calm, almost bored, like he was addressing an insect. "This is your final warning," Cole said. "Surrender. There will be no negotiations after this." The transmission ended abruptly, giving no time for reply. Vraxis drew a long, ragged breath. In the silence that followed, he could hear the whispered prayers of his bridge crew, each muttering in their own language. Desperation hung in the air like a heavy fog. "Enemy movements detected," the tactical officer cried out. "They're preparing to fire." "All ships, defensive formation Omega," Vraxis shouted. "If we can punch through the left flank, we might—" Before he could finish, a series of bright blue flashes erupted across the human fleet. Their weapons fired in perfect synchronization, a relentless, calculated barrage that tore into the Empire's ships with surgical precision. Vraxis watched in horror as 3 cruisers simply vanished from the sensors, torn apart in seconds. The Empire's defensive lines collapsed like wet paper. Screams filled the bridge as more ships reported catastrophic damage or went silent altogether. "Sir, our left flank is gone," someone cried. Vraxis squeezed his eyes shut for half a heartbeat, trying to think. There had to be a way out. There always was. "Signal all remaining forces," he growled. "Prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. Get us out of here." "But sir—" "Do it!" Vraxis roared, slamming his fist against the control panel hard enough to crack it. The helmsman scrambled to comply, entering the emergency jump coordinates. Just as he confirmed the jump sequence, another alarm blared, harsher, sharper than before. "Human ships are jamming our hyperspace drives!" the engineer shrieked. "We can't jump!" The words hit Vraxis like a physical blow. His legs gave out, and he stumbled back into his command chair, staring blankly at the screen. Trapped. They were trapped. He looked again at the human fleet, now slowly advancing on them like hunters closing in for the kill. Vraxis realized with a sickening certainty that they weren't just going to lose this battle. They were about to be erased. Not a surrender, not an occupation. Total annihilation. The humans hadn't just come to defend their world. They had come to end the Empire. He had no choice left. Swallowing the bitter acid of defeat, Vraxis opened a transmission to Admiral Cole. "This is Admiral Vraxis of the Galactic Empire," he said, voice hoarse and broken. We surrender." The screen flickered to life again, showing Cole once more. The human admiral gave a small, cold smile that held no mercy at all. "You had your chance," he said. "Now you live, or die, on our terms." The screen went black. Vraxis slumped in his chair, feeling the weight of centuries crash down on his shoulders. Around him, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence, the mighty empire reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale for the history books. They had thought themselves invincible. They had thought humanity was weak. They had been wrong. So terribly, fatally wrong. The lights on the command deck flickered as the human ships pressed closer, their weapons hot and ready. A few desperate ships in the Imperial fleet tried to break away, engines screaming against the jamming fields, but one by one they were picked off like insects under a magnifying glass. Explosions painted the blackness of space with ugly orange blossoms. Vraxis sat motionless, watching the slaughter unfold. In all his years of conquest, He had never seen anything like this. An enemy that not only outmatched them, but showed no hesitation in crushing them utterly. No quarter given, no hesitation, no mercy. The humans fought as if they had a personal grudge against the very idea of the Empire existing. He gritted his teeth, the taste of blood sharp in his mouth. This wasn't a war anymore. It was an execution. A soft beep sounded on the command chair's console. Private channel. Incoming. Vraxis leaned forward and accepted the transmission, expecting another ultimatum. Instead, Admiral Cole's voice came through, calm and cold. "Listen carefully, Vraxis," Cole said. "You have exactly 10 minutes to order your fleet to stand down and evacuate all surviving personnel from the ships. Any vessel that fails to comply will be destroyed. There are no negotiations, no treaties, no mercy. Understand?" Vraxis hesitated, pride screaming inside him to resist. But reality crushed it swiftly. They had already lost. Further resistance would only spill more Imperial blood for nothing. He pressed the transmission button and spoke in a voice that no longer sounded like his own. "Understood." When the line cut, Vraxis slumped back again, the fire inside him extinguished. He turned to his shattered bridge crew. "Order all surviving units to power down weapons, lower shields, and prepare evacuation pods," he said. "Inform them we have surrendered." The crew moved without question. Orders were relayed, ships powered down, and thousands of small escape pods began launching from the Imperial ships, drifting slowly toward a neutral zone established by the humans. Vraxis watched as his mighty fleet, the pride of the Empire, scattered like dying embers into the void. The humiliation was unbearable. Every second felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Yet the humans did not fire. They let the escape pods drift safely. They had won, they knew it, and they wanted the Empire to witness their mercy as much as their wrath. It was a statement, one that Vraxis understood all too clearly. You are broken, you are conquered, and you are allowed to live only because we permit it. Vraxis rose slowly from his command chair, his legs unsteady. His ship, the Imperial dreadnought Velkar, would be boarded soon. He could already see the human assault craft docking along the hull, their sharp black bodies like the teeth of a predator, ready to rip apart what little was left. He took a long, last look at the bridge, memorizing every detail. The cracked control panels, the dead crewmen slumped over their stations, the thin smoke rising from shattered consoles. This was the end of an era. The doors at the rear of the bridge hissed open, and human soldiers poured in, weapons raised, faces hidden behind expressionless helmets. "Hands where we can see them," one barked. Vraxis raised his hands slowly, feeling the heavy gaze of every soldier on him. He was just another prisoner now, no longer Admiral Vraxis of the Galactic Empire, just a defeated relic of a dead regime. As he was roughly shackled and led away, he caught one final glimpse of the viewport. Outside, the human fleet floated like a steel storm over the broken remains of his armada. The Empire had come to Earth expecting slaves. Instead, they had found monsters, and Vraxis knew, with a deep and terrible certainty, that the galaxy itself would never be the same again. The walk down the ruined halls of the Velkar felt endless. Each step echoed with the shame Vraxis carried like a chain around his neck. The human soldiers flanked him on both sides, their weapons always trained, their movements sharp and professional. They didn't jeer, didn't speak, didn't even glance at him with the contempt he might have expected. It was almost worse. He wasn't even worth their hatred, just another defeated enemy to be processed and forgotten. They led him to one of the drop shuttles docked on the hull. As he was forced inside, Vraxis caught a glimpse of the other prisoners, Imperial officers, ship captains, soldiers, all stripped of their weapons helmets abandoned, faces pale and hollow. These were the finest the Empire had produced, now sitting quietly like cattle awaiting slaughter. The shuttle doors sealed shut with a hiss, and a low hum filled the chamber as it detached from the Velcar. Through the small, reinforced window, Vraxis could see the massive human flagship growing closer. It was an ugly ship, brutal and utilitarian, without the sleek grandeur of imperial designs. But every inch of it radiated strength and menace, a floating fortress made for one purpose: war. The shuttle docked, and one by one they were herded out. No words were spoken. Vraxis stumbled a bit as he stepped onto the cold metal floor of the human ship. The air smelled different, harsh, industrial, full of oil and ozone. It was a smell of machinery and sweat, not ceremony and empire. They were marched through a labyrinth of corridors until they arrived at a massive holding bay. Hundreds of prisoners already filled the space, surrounded by heavily armed guards. A thick, invisible weight hung over everything, the undeniable knowledge that their fates were no longer their own. Vraxis was pushed into the line and left standing there. For a while, he just stared at the floor, lost in the swirling storm of his thoughts. Then, a low murmur rippled through the crowd. He looked up. Standing on a raised platform at the far end of the bay was Admiral Cole, flanked by several human officers. He wasn't dressed in ceremonial garb or some ridiculous victor's robe. No medals gleamed on his chest. He wore a simple, worn black uniform. Practical, efficient, deadly. Cole stepped forward and surveyed the gathered prisoners, his gray eyes as cold as deep space. "You thought we were weak," he began, voice carrying easily across the bay. "You thought humanity would kneel." Vraxis felt the sting of the words, felt them strike the hearts of everyone present. There was no anger in Cole's tone, no boastfulness, just a simple, brutal truth. "You didn't understand us," Cole continued. "You thought because we were fractured, because we fought amongst ourselves, that we were easy prey. You mistook our chaos for weakness, our divisions for frailty." The human admiral leaned in slightly, voice dropping into a tone that made the hair along Vrax's neck rise. "You failed to see what every tyrant before you has learned the hard way, that nothing unites humanity faster than an enemy who tries to break us." Silence hung thick after his words. Cole straightened again, hands clasped behind his back. "You are no longer soldiers. You are no longer rulers. You are prisoners of war. Your fate will be decided by the United Terran Tribunal. And believe me, Earth does not forget." He turned sharply and marched away, the heavy doors at the rear of the bay hissing closed behind him. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Vraxis stared after him, a hollow pit opening in his chest. He understood now why the Empire had lost. The humans hadn't just been fighting for survival. They had been fighting for revenge, for dignity, for every insult and every threat the Empire had ever thrown at them. And they had fought like only humans could, with every ounce of fury, stubbornness, and savagery in their blood. Vraxis slumped back against the cold wall of the holding bay, the final pieces of his pride crumbling to dust. They hadn't just underestimated Earth. They had awakened it. And the galaxy would bleed for it. The hours dragged by in the holding bay, a heavy silence pressing down on everyone. Some of the captured officers huddled together in small groups, whispering in broken voices, clinging to scraps of hope. Others just sat alone, staring into nothing, their minds adrift somewhere far from this cold, metallic prison. Vraxis stayed where he was, slumped against the wall, watching, listening, trying to piece together what little information he could. He learned fast that the humans had moved with terrifying efficiency after the battle. Every Imperial ship that surrendered was boarded within minutes, every officer catalogued, every database ripped apart. There would be no opportunity for a second resistance, no chance to rally and fight again. The humans hadn't just defeated them on the battlefield, they were ripping the Empire out by its roots. A harsh klaxon blared overhead, jolting everyone to their feet. The prisoners were ordered into rows, hands behind their heads, as heavily armed soldiers stormed the bay again. This time, they weren't just here to guard. They were here to select. Vraxis tensed as soldiers moved down the rows, stopping at intervals, tagging certain prisoners and pulling them away. No explanations were given. No pattern was obvious. Some were high-ranking officers, others were lowly deckhands. The selection seemed almost random, but the fear it spread was surgical, calculated. When they reached him, a human soldier paused. Their visor hid their expression, but there was a hesitation there, almost like they recognized him. Then the soldier raised a scanner, its green beam sweeping across Vraxis' face. "Admiral Vraxis," a mechanical voice confirmed from the device. The soldier tapped something on their wrist pad. Two more humans appeared instantly, gripping Vraxis by the arms and dragging him out of line. He didn't struggle. There was no point. They led him through more twisting corridors until they reached a small interrogation room. Spartan, clinical, a table and 2 chairs bolted to the floor. A single camera blinked in one corner. Vraxis was shoved into a chair, his bindings secured to the tabletop. The soldiers left without a word, the door locking behind them with a final, decisive hiss. He sat there for what felt like hours, the cold metal seeping into his bones. His mind wandered in dark circles, memories of glorious battles, of victory parades on the homeworld, of the Emperor's proud voice declaring the Empire's destiny among the stars. All of it. Ashes now. The door finally opened. Admiral Cole walked in alone, a datapad in one hand. He didn't sit. He just stood there, looking down at Vraxis like one might study a dangerous animal trapped behind glass. "Vraxis," Cole said, voice flat. "Architect of the Imperial Northern Campaign, executor of the Alari massacres, slayer of the Ventari colonies." Each title was spoken like a blade being twisted in Vraxis' gut. "You built your reputation on crushing the weak," Cole continued, his eyes narrowing, "on conquering civilizations that couldn't fight back. You carved out your legacy in blood and ash, and you thought Earth would be another name on your list." Vraxis said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Cole leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low, almost conversational tone. "Here's the thing you never understood," he said. "Weakness isn't our curse, it's our weapon. It's what makes us dangerous, because when we're pushed, when we're desperate, we don't break." He tapped the datapad, and a hologram flared to life between them. It showed footage of Earth's cities after the Empire's first strikes, burning ruins, crying children, people digging survivors out of rubble with their bare hands. "You showed us no mercy," Cole said quietly, "and now we will show you what humanity does when it has nothing left to lose." He turned off the holo and tossed the datapad onto the table, where it slid to a stop in front of Vraxis. "You're going to tell us everything," Cole said. "Fleet movements, base locations, supply routes. You're going to help us tear your empire apart from the inside." Vraxis finally lifted his head, meeting Cole's icy gaze. "And if I refuse?" he rasped. Cole smiled. Not a kind smile, not a human smile. "If you refuse," he said, "we won't kill you." He leaned closer, his voice a low, deadly whisper. "We'll send you back, alive, broken, so your people can see what happens to those who think they can stand against Earth." For the first time since his capture, true terror stabbed through Vraxis' heart. Not for himself, for the Empire. Because he knew now, the humans weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for vengeance, and they were very, very good at it. Vraxis stared at the datapad like it was a bomb about to go off. His hands, shackled to the table, trembled slightly, though he willed them still. Around him, the air felt thick, charged, like the moment before a storm tears the sky open. He had been interrogated before, had even ordered the interrogations of others. But never like this. Never with so much weight pressing down. It wasn't just about extracting information. It was about crushing his will entirely, making him a symbol of total defeat. Cole remained silent, giving Vraxis the space to stew in his own fear. It was a tactic, of course. Humans were masters of pressure. They didn't scream, didn't torture, not like the Empire had done to its enemies. No, they let you destroy yourself from the inside out. Minutes dragged into hours. No food, no water, no sleep. The walls seemed to close in, and Vraxis found himself remembering things he hadn't thought of in decades. The first colony he helped burn, the shrieks of the Alari children echoing through the smoke. He had once been proud of those victories, had worn them like badges of honor. Now they clung to him like chains made of rotting flesh. Cole returned eventually, stepping through the door with a quiet, measured tread. He didn't speak right away. Just set down another datapad, this one showing detailed schematics of Imperial space stations, fleet rosters, personnel files. You see, Cole said calmly, we already know a lot, thanks to the crews who surrendered willingly, thanks to the colonies you abandoned during your retreat. The only thing we're missing is confirmation. He slid the datapad closer with one finger, the scrape of metal on metal making Vraxis flinch. And you, Admiral, are going to confirm it. Not for us, for history. Vraxis said nothing. He focused on breathing, trying to summon the reserves of defiance that had carried him through 1,000 battles. But they were paper-thin now, crumbling against the weight of what he had seen, what he had lost. Your Empire abandoned you the moment we broke your fleet, Cole said, his voice almost gentle. You know that, don't you? No reinforcements, no desperate last charge, no rescue ships slipping through the blockade. They left you to rot. Vraxis opened his mouth to argue, to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because it was true. The Empire had left him behind without a second thought. He was nothing to them now, disposable, forgotten. Help us, Cole said. Tell us everything. You might just survive this. Vraxis laughed then, a dry, broken sound, bitter and small. Survival. As what? A pet? A prisoner trotted out for propaganda films? A living trophy? He had survived countless battles, entire worlds burning behind him. But this was something else. Survival here meant becoming a ghost of himself, a living reminder of the Empire's failure. Yet when he thought about the alternative, being paraded back to his homeworld, shattered and defeated for all to see, the choice became simpler. It wasn't about honor anymore. That had been stripped from him the moment Earth's fleets had torn his empire apart like paper. It was about vengeance. Not against humanity. No, they had earned their victory. It was against the Empire that had used him and discarded him. Slowly, painfully, Vraxis leaned forward. What do you want to know? He said, his voice hoarse but steady. Cole didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just nodded once, sharply, like a general accepting the surrender of a worthy opponent. Everything, Cole said. And so Vraxis spoke. He spoke of hidden supply caches in dead systems. He spoke of secret bases buried under the moons of forgotten worlds. He gave them fleet schedules, troop deployments, the names of imperial governors who would fold like wet paper at the first sign of human fleets. He gave them the Empire's blood. Every word he spoke was a knife in his own soul, but he did it anyway, because vengeance burned hotter than pride. And as he talked, he could see the future unfold behind Cole's eyes, a future where Earth rose not just as a survivor, but as a new and terrible power in the galaxy. A future where the Empire would be nothing but a cautionary tale whispered in fear. Vraxis spoke until his throat was raw, until his voice was a whisper. And still, Cole listened. Still, Earth plotted its next move. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. When the last detail slipped from Vraxis' lips, he slumped back in his chair, exhausted beyond anything he'd ever felt. His head throbbed, his vision blurred, but there was a strange hollow relief in the surrender. He had nothing left to give, no more lies to tell, no pride left to defend. Across the table, Admiral Cole powered off the recorder and stood silently for a moment, studying him. The coldness was still there, but there was something else now, too. A flicker of grim respect. Not forgiveness. Never forgiveness. But a quiet acknowledgement between two soldiers who knew the cost of war all too well. "You did the right thing," Cole said simply. Vraxis laughed, a dry, broken sound. "Right thing for whom?" Cole didn't answer. He didn't have to. The door hissed open, and two human guards stepped in. They unlocked Vraxis' bindings, roughly hauling him to his feet. His legs barely worked, but they dragged him along without ceremony. The walk this time was different. Not through the corridors of the prison decks. No, this time they moved deeper into the bowels of the human flagship, past hangar bays teeming with new fleets being prepared, past rows of engineers outfitting sleek, deadly ships with weapons that made Imperial tech look like relics. Earth wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were preparing to expand. And Vraxis knew, deep in his gut, that nothing in the galaxy would stop them now. Finally, they reached a small chamber sealed by heavy blast doors. Inside, a single shuttle waited, powered up and ready. Vraxis recognized the model, a basic long-range diplomatic vessel. Unarmed, lightly shielded, it wouldn't stand a chance against military craft. But it wasn't meant for battle. It was meant for humiliation. Admiral Cole stood by the ramp, arms folded behind his back. "We're sending you back to the Empire," he said. "You'll be allowed to land on your homeworld. No weapons, no defenses, just you." Vraxis stared at him, cold realization sinking in. "You want them to see what's left of me?" he rasped. Cole nodded once. "You're the first stone, the warning shot, a reminder to your people of what's coming." Vraxis closed his eyes for a long moment. There was no escape from this, no redemption. Only the slow unraveling of everything he had ever believed in. "You could just kill me," he said quietly. Cole's face hardened. That would be mercy. Without another word, the guards pushed him forward. He stumbled up the ramp into the shuttle, the doors hissing closed behind him. The ship rumbled to life, autopilot engaging as it disconnected from the docking clamps. Through the tiny viewport, Vraxis watched the human flagship drift away, its shadow swallowing stars. As the shuttle accelerated into the vast emptiness, Vraxis slumped into the pilot's chair and stared blankly ahead. His homeworld lay ahead, waiting. But he would not return as a hero. He would return as a ghost, a living corpse, and behind him, rising from the ruins of war, humanity, brutal, vengeful, unbreakable, would march across the stars. They had shown the galaxy their weakness once. Now they would show it their teeth. The journey through hyperspace was a blur of cold silence. No one spoke to him, no voices crackled through the comms. The ship was locked on autopilot, programmed with a single destination, the Imperial throne world. Vraxis sat alone in the pilot's seat, watching the shifting colors of the void slip past the viewport. Time lost all meaning. Minutes, hours, days, it didn't matter anymore. Every breath he took felt heavier, a reminder of the shame he carried like armor made of rot. When the shuttle finally dropped out of hyperspace, the sight of his homeworld hit him like a punch to the gut. There it was, the jewel of the Empire. Gleaming cities sprawled across continents, massive orbital stations hanging like silver crowns above the atmosphere, fleets of sleek Imperial warships patrolling proudly in orbit. It should have stirred pride in him. Once it would have. Now it only made the hollow inside him ache deeper. The Imperial control towers hailed the shuttle immediately, their voices sharp with suspicion. Unidentified vessel, transmit identification codes and purpose. The ship answered for him automatically, broadcasting his name, rank, and the diplomatic override codes built into the shuttle's systems. Silence followed for several seconds. Then another voice, colder and clipped, came through. Proceed to docking Platform 6. Do not deviate. Vraxis set his jaw and obeyed. Not that he had a choice. As the shuttle descended, he could already see the crowds gathering at the spaceport below. Hundreds, maybe thousands, officials, soldiers, civilians. News drones hovered above like metal vultures, capturing every moment for the Empire's propaganda networks. They didn't know yet. They didn't understand what was about to walk off that shuttle. The landing gear struck the platform with a heavy thud, the engines whining down to silence. The ramp lowered slowly, creaking against the platform's polished surface. Vraxis stood, smoothing the battered remnants of his uniform. No insignia, no weapon, only a tattered shadow of the admiral he had once been. He stepped into the light. For a heartbeat, the crowd was silent, staring in confused awe. Cameras flashed. Soldiers stood at attention, saluting sharply. And then someone gasped. Another whisper rippled through the crowd, a tide of horror. They saw the hollowness in his eyes, the way he staggered slightly as he walked. They saw the absence of an escort, the lack of any triumph, any ceremony. They saw the thin, mocking grin that curled across his lips, the broken pride he didn't even try to hide. Whispers turned to shouts. Shouts turned to screams. Where is the fleet? Where are our heroes? What happened? Questions hurled at him like stones, but Vraxis said nothing. He walked down the ramp with slow, measured steps, each one hammering another nail into the coffin of the Empire's myth of invincibility. An official rushed forward, trying to take control of the scene, trying to salvage the narrative. But it was too late. The people saw the truth written on Vraxis' body, the tremor in his hands, the exhaustion in his bones, the ruin in his eyes. The Empire wasn't safe. The Empire wasn't eternal. The Empire had fallen. It just didn't know it yet. Behind Vraxis, in the cold, endless void of space, humanity gathered its fleets, built its war machines, sharpened its knives. Earth had been attacked. Earth had bled. And now Earth would conquer. As Vraxis reached the edge of the platform, he paused, turning slightly toward the stunned crowds, the flashing cameras, the crumbling faces of once proud officials. He raised his head high, not in defiance, but in finality. They're coming, he said, his voice low but carrying like a funeral bell, and there will be no mercy. The silence that followed was heavier than any bomb. Vraxis let the words hang in the air, a prophecy written not in hope, but in blood. Then he turned and walked into the heart of the doomed empire, a broken man bearing the banner of humanity's vengeance. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, the galaxy itself would burn. The sky over Nova Europa burned red. Nobody on the colony world ever thought the war would reach them. They had fields of blue wheat that rolled under the soft suns, cities full of laughing children, towers that glittered like silver glass. Peace was the only thing they ever knew. But peace is a fragile thing when you're human in a galaxy that never forgets old grudges. The enemy came in sleek, black ships, not bothering to even hail or warn. The first bombs cracked the earth open, tearing apart schools, marketplaces, and every place people thought they were safe. Within an hour, half the cities on Nova Europa were smoke and rubble. General Mara Voss watched it unfold from a bunker deep under New Paris. She clenched her fists so hard her nails drew blood. On the holoscreen above her, feeds from other colonies flickered in, Sigma Prime, Halcyon Reach, even Enoch's Cradle, all burning, all under attack. Humanity's outer worlds were falling one by one, and the enemy didn't even have the decency to make demands. They wanted extermination. Behind her, someone muttered, "Where the hell are the giants?" Mara turned slowly. Lieutenant Brandt, young, fresh out of academy, not yet used to real war. His voice was small, like a child asking where his parents were during a storm. She didn't answer right away. Part of her wanted to tell him the truth. The giants were gone. Lost to history. Stories parents told their kids to make them proud of their ancestors. Huge humans, bred for strength, endurance, rage, so big that a normal soldier barely came up to their waist. They were built when Earth first realized it wasn't the top of the food chain anymore. But Mara wasn't in the mood for fairy tales or comforting lies. "They're coming," she said. "They always come when it's bad enough." Brandt swallowed, not fully believing. But he nodded, hope flickering in his tired eyes. The floor shook as another bomb hit somewhere close. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. Mara grabbed her rifle from the wall and motioned to the others. "Move," she barked. "We hold Sector 9 until evac shuttles get the civilians out. I don't care if it's the end of the world. You hold the goddamn line." Soldiers scrambled, loading weapons, checking armor, slamming magazines into rifles with shaking hands. They all looked like ghosts, pale and hollow-eyed under the harsh lights. Mara strapped on her helmet, hiding her fear under layers of steel and discipline. They filed out into the streets, into the hell Nova Europa had become. It was worse out here. Bodies littered the ground. Smoke clogged the air so thick you could barely see the burnt-out shells of what had once been houses, schools, lives. The sky, once a gentle violet, was now black and roiling with ash. Mara pushed forward through the rubble, shouting orders, firing at any movement that wasn't human. Drones zipped past them, scanning, firing stun pulses, trying to pin down survivors. Alien soldiers in chitinous armor moved like insects, cold and precise. Brandt was hit first. A burst of energy slammed into his chest, knocking him off his feet. He gasped, trying to rise, blood leaking from his mouth. Mara dragged him behind cover, cursing. He wasn't dead, yet. But the way he blinked up at her, confused and scared, she knew he wouldn't make it without a medic. "Giants," he whispered again, before passing out. Mara's throat tightened. For a second, she wanted to scream, to howl at the sky for help, for backup, for anything. And then the ground really started to shake. Not from bombs, from footsteps. Heavy, thunderous, earth-cracking footsteps. Mara froze. So did everyone else. The enemy, the drones, even the damn smoke seemed to hesitate. From the dust and ruin beyond the cratered buildings, massive figures began to appear. Human figures, but not like any normal humans. Towering at nearly 20 feet tall, their armor gleamed dark and dented from 1,000 battles. Massive rifles were slung casually over their shoulders like toys. Their faces were scarred, brutal, determined. The giants had come. One of them, a woman with a shaved head and a long plasma scar running down her arm, stomped into view. She carried a hammer as tall as a man, crackling with raw energy. Her voice boomed over the battlefield, loud and furious. "You hit our worlds," she roared. "Now you face our wrath!" And with a deafening roar, the giants charged. Mara barely had time to process what was happening before the battlefield exploded into chaos. The giants hit the enemy lines like a tidal wave of metal and fury. The alien soldiers who had moved so carefully, so methodically before, now scattered like ants under a boot. The giant woman with the hammer swung it once, and the blast knocked a dozen of the chitin-armored invaders into the air like rag dolls. Another giant, a massive man with shoulders wide as tanks, ripped a drone out of the sky with one hand and crushed it into sparking debris. Mara stared, stunned. She had heard the old stories. Who hadn't? Stories of the Titan Project, when Earth's last hope against a conquering alien empire had been to create warriors too big, too strong, and too stubborn to be stopped. But she had always thought it was ancient history, old propaganda videos to make people feel proud. She had never dreamed they were real. "Move!" someone shouted into her comm, dragging her back to reality. Mara shook herself and grabbed Brant under the arms, hauling him toward the fallback point. Around her, soldiers rallied. You could feel the fear draining from them, replaced by something else, something wild, fierce. Hope. Gunfire rattled and flashed all around them. The enemy was trying to regroup, but the giants tore through their formations like they were nothing. One of them scooped up a broken armored vehicle and hurled it across a whole street, smashing a command unit that had been barking orders from the rear. Mara ducked behind the shattered remains of a fountain, laying Brant down carefully. He was unconscious now, but breathing. Good enough for now. She turned back to the fight, heart pounding. The giant woman, people were already starting to call her Hammer over the comms, strode right into the teeth of the enemy advance. Plasma blasts hit her armor and barely scorched it. A squad of alien commandos charged at her, thinking they could bring her down with sheer numbers. They didn't last 3 seconds. The hammer came down once, twice, 3 times, and each strike sent shockwaves that cracked pavement and sent bodies flying. "Holy shit," Mara muttered. "Get the civilians out." Hammer roared over the battlefield, somehow hearing and speaking into every soldier's comlink at once. "We'll cover you." Mara didn't need to be told twice. She barked orders, and her squad snapped into motion, moving wounded and civilians toward the last shuttle pad. As she ran, she kept stealing glances back at the giants. They weren't just fighting. They were enjoying it, smashing, laughing, roaring battle cries that shook the very air. It was like they had been waiting years for a fight like this, like they lived for it. And for the first time since the bombing started, Mara felt something burn inside her chest. Not fear, not grief, pride. Earth wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The evacuation site was chaos. Shuttles were lifting off as fast as they could load, smoke clogging the air, civilians screaming and crying. Mara and her team shoved through the crowd, waving their rifles, clearing paths. "Get them out!" she yelled. "Go, go!" A mother clutching 2 small children stumbled toward her, sobbing. Mara grabbed the kids, helping shove them into the open door of a shuttle. The pilot, a kid who barely looked old enough to drive, was pale but steady as he helped them in. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing shriek ripped through the noise. Mara spun just in time to see a new kind of enemy dropping from the sky. Black-armored, sleeker, faster. Elite units. The real killers. "Incoming!" she shouted, diving behind the shuttle for cover. The elites landed hard, plasma rifles already firing. One shuttle went up in a ball of fire immediately. Screams filled the air. Soldiers scrambled to return fire, but the elites moved with terrifying precision, weaving through the chaos like ghosts. Mara squeezed the trigger until her rifle overheated, but it wasn't enough. There were too many. Too fast. And then another giant landed. Not walked. Landed. A shadow fell over Mara, and she looked up to see him falling like a meteor, crashing into the ground with a thunderous boom that split the earth. He rose up, towering over the battlefield, eyes glowing behind his battered helmet. This one was different from the others. Older, meaner. His armor was a patchwork of old battles, scars of wars fought and survived. His voice, when it came, was like thunder rolling over a mountain. "You think you can wipe us out?" he growled. "You think you can bomb our children and walk away?" He pulled a massive twin-barrel gun from his back, aiming it at the elites. "Now," he snarled, "you deal with me." And he pulled the trigger. The gun's roar was deafening. It didn't fire bullets. It fired destruction. Twin blasts of energy ripped through the air, punching holes through the elite soldiers like they were made of paper. Whole clusters of them simply ceased to exist, vaporized where they stood. Mara ducked her head instinctively, feeling the heat of the blasts even from behind cover. Dust and debris blasted outward, knocking civilians off their feet. But the giant didn't let up. He moved forward step by step, each stride a declaration of war, mowing down the enemy with terrifying precision. The elites tried to regroup, scattering, trying to flank him. A few even got behind him, unloading plasma rifles into his back. But his armor, thick, ugly, scarred, barely flinched. He twisted around, grabbed one elite in his huge fist, and crushed him like a tin can. The others bolted, retreating toward the smoking remains of their dropships. Mara didn't waste the moment. "Move!" she screamed, waving the last groups of civilians toward the loading bays. "Get them off this rock!" Soldiers ran with them, pushing wounded comrades onto the ramps, dragging unconscious kids by the arms if they had to. There was no time to be gentle anymore. In the chaos, the giant glanced down at her, just for a second. Mara felt the weight of that look. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even concern. It was a silent acknowledgement, a nod between warriors. She nodded back. Another explosion rocked the spaceport. One of the enemy warships was descending, trying to cut off the evacuation. Its guns spun up, targeting the shuttles. Mara's heart froze. Not now. Not after everything. The ship's cannons started to glow, but then the ground itself screamed. A second giant, this one even bigger, wearing armor covered in crude, hand-painted kill marks, leaped onto the ship like a goddamn beast. He landed on top of it with a deafening crash, his boots punching through the hull. The ship tilted dangerously, engines sputtering. The giant didn't even hesitate. He ripped open a panel on the ship's back, grabbed a massive fuel line, and ripped it free. The ship tried to climb higher to shake him off, but it was already too late. Flames shot from its belly. It spun wildly, belching fire, then slammed into a hillside outside the city with a fireball that lit up the whole sky. The giants didn't just fight. They didn't just survive. They dominated. Mara almost forgot to breathe. She had seen heroes before, tough soldiers, brave captains, good men and women giving everything they had. But this was something else. The titans of old weren't myths. They were flesh and blood, and they were pissed. Her comm crackled. "Shuttle Wave 3, clear!" someone shouted. "Evac 90% complete!" Another voice chimed in. Mara slammed her fist against the hull of a nearby shuttle, pure adrenaline flooding her system. "All soldiers fall back to the evacuation point," she barked. "We're getting out of here." The giants kept fighting as they pulled back, covering the retreat. The woman with the hammer, everyone was calling her now like it was her damn birth name, planted herself between the enemy forces and the shuttle pad, swinging her hammer in brutal, perfect arcs. Sparks and blood sprayed every time it connected. The giant with the twin-barrel gun, some were calling him Grim now, stood just ahead of her, firing in short, controlled bursts, cutting down anything that tried to flank. As Mara sprinted up the last shuttle ramp, she looked back one last time. And what she saw was burned into her memory forever. The giants weren't just defending. They were sending a message to the galaxy, to anyone who thought humanity was weak because they loved peace, because they farmed, because they built schools and raised laughing children. The message was simple. If you come for humanity's children, humanity will send its monsters after you. The shuttle lifted off with a roar, the colony shrinking below them into a burning, broken landscape. Mara slumped into a seat, heart hammering, sweat soaking her armor. She looked out the window one last time. Down below, through the smoke and flame, she could still see them. The giants, holding the line, standing tall, unbreakable. Brant stirred beside her, groggy and pale. "Giants," he croaked. Mara smiled grimly. "Yeah," she whispered. "Giants." And for the first time since the bombs fell, she believed they might actually win. The shuttle rattled and groaned as it climbed through the atmosphere, a mess of wounded civilians and shell-shocked soldiers packed into every available seat. Smoke from Nova Europa still clung to the ship's underside, like a second skin. Mara sat near the hatch, clutching her rifle even though she didn't expect to use it anymore. Old habits died hard. Brant was strapped in next to her, pale but stable now, an IV drip hooked to his arm. His fingers twitched restlessly, like he was still dreaming about the battle. Across the cabin, murmurs started to rise, people whispering, dazed, trying to make sense of what they'd seen. "They were real," someone kept saying over and over. "I saw one rip a tank in half with his bare hands." "They saved us." Mara tuned it out. Her mind was stuck on what she had witnessed. Those giants, those monsters, weren't just soldiers. They were something else. Something humanity had hidden away, maybe even from itself. The shuttle's pilot's voice crackled through the overhead speakers. "Attention passengers, we're making a jump to Earth orbit base. Expected arrival in 30 minutes. Hold tight." Earth, home. But Mara didn't feel relief. Not really. Because if the war had reached the colonies, Earth wouldn't be far behind. She leaned her head back against the cold steel wall, closing her eyes. She needed answers. And somehow she knew exactly where to start. By the time they docked at Earth orbit base, the wounded were being rushed out by teams of frantic medics. Mara shoved her way through the crowd, ignoring the protests, waving her rank like a weapon. She needed to get to command. Now inside the towering station, it was chaos. Holographic battle maps showing entire sectors under siege, officers barking orders, civilians packed into holding bays like cattle. And at the center of it all, under the flickering lights of the war room, stood General Marcus Hale. Hale was a legend. Older than the stars, it seemed, with a silver beard and a back straighter than a steel girder. His eyes, one real, one cybernetic, snapped to Mara the second she entered. "You saw them," he said, no preamble. Mara nodded, still catching her breath. "The giants," she said. "They're real." Hale's mouth twitched in something that might have been a smile, or maybe just a grimace. "They were never a myth," he said quietly. "We just made people forget." Mara frowned. "Why?" Hale turned to the battle maps, gesturing for her to follow. "Because the Titans project wasn't something humanity was proud of," he said. "It was desperation, pure and simple. When Earth first made contact with the galactic civilizations 2 centuries ago, we realized real quick we weren't the apex predators anymore. We needed weapons they wouldn't expect. Not machines, not bombs, humans." He tapped a display, and ancient, grainy footage lit up the air. Giants in crude armor, stomping through alien battlefields, smashing enemies like insects. Enhanced growth, Hale explained. Muscle density beyond anything natural, reflexes, regeneration. They were designed for war, and only war. Mara swallowed hard. And when the wars ended? She asked. We buried them, Hale said, voice rough. Locked them away. Some went into deep cryo-sleep. Some just disappeared into the wilderness. We promised ourselves humanity would never need monsters again. He turned to face her fully now, his real eye hard, the cybernetic one glowing faintly. But monsters are exactly what we need now. Mara's stomach twisted. She thought about Hammer, Grimm, the others. They weren't just weapons. They were people, broken, angry, abandoned. And they're just fighting for us, she asked, almost not believing it. For now, Hale said. But make no mistake, they remember what we did to them. When this war ends, if it ends, we'll have a new fight on our hands. Mara looked at the battle maps again. Whole systems gone dark. Colony worlds smoking. Earth itself probably only weeks, maybe days, from invasion. We cross that bridge later, she said, jaw tightening. Right now we survive. Hale nodded once, approving. You're assigned to Titan Liaison Command, he said. You leave in 1 hour. Pack light. You'll be fighting side by side with them. Mara blinked. What? You fought alongside them already, Hale said. They trust you. They need a human face. Someone who remembers they're not just machines built to kill. He handed her a datapad. Coordinates. A mission briefing. A grim little message flashing at the bottom. Earth Offensive, Phase 1. Mara exhaled slowly. The giants had stepped onto the battlefield. Now humanity was about to unleash them properly. Not just to defend, but to strike back. And this time, they wouldn't be fighting alone. Mara didn't even bother stopping at her assigned quarters. She grabbed a fresh rifle, loaded up a sidearm, slung a med kit over her shoulder, and made her way straight to the shuttle bays. The coordinates General Hale had given her led to Hangar 17, deep beneath the main station. Off the maps, off the books. She had to pass 2 checkpoints, each guarded by soldiers who looked like they were ready to shoot first and asked questions never. By the time she reached the final door, her palms were sweating. A sensor scanned her face, her ID. The door slid open with a hiss. The room beyond wasn't a normal hangar. No sleek ships, no gleaming equipment, just a massive, darkened space with shadows moving like giants in a child's nightmare. And there they were. The giants. Mara felt her throat tighten as she stepped in. Up close, they were even more terrifying. Their armor wasn't polished or standardized like a normal army's. It was a patchwork of old battle gear, scavenged tech, and personal trophies. Skulls, markings, scratches from battles so old nobody even remembered their names. Hammer stood near the center, her enormous hammer resting casually against her shoulder. She was laughing, deep and rich, at something another giant said. A mountain of a man with burn scars climbing up one side of his face. Grimm was there too, silent, sitting on a cargo crate reinforced just for his weight. He was cleaning the massive twin-barreled gun with steady, methodical movements. His armor was even more battered than Mara remembered. Fresh scorch marks, cracks spiderwebbing across one thigh plate. And standing apart from the rest, watching everything with cold, sharp eyes, was the oldest giant, the one who had landed like a meteor at the shuttle pad. They all turned when Mara stepped closer. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Hammer grinned. "Well, well," she said, voice rumbling through the air. "If it isn't the little soldier who stood her ground—" Mara forced herself to stand straight, keeping her fear locked deep inside. "General Hale sent me," she said. "Said you might need a liaison, someone to help coordinate." The scarred man, whom Mara would later learn they called Rook, snorted loudly. "Coordinate," he said, like it was the funniest word he'd ever heard. Hammer just kept grinning, swinging her hammer down to rest against the floor with a loud clang. "You fought," she said. "You bled. You didn't run. That's enough for me." Grim looked up from his weapon, studied Mara with those cold, unreadable eyes. Then he gave a single, slow nod. The oldest giant stepped forward now, towering over Mara like a mountain come alive. His armor creaked with old weight. His voice, when he spoke, was a low growl. "Name's Warden," he said. "I lead this pack. You stay sharp, you stay honest, and you might live through what's coming." Mara nodded stiffly. "What is coming?" she asked. Warden glanced back at the others, then turned his gaze to the far wall, where a battered hologram flickered into life. It showed the enemy fleet, hundreds of ships, thousands of ground troops, and one massive command vessel at the center, a ship so big it blotted out the stars behind it. "The enemy's making a push for Earth," Warden said. "But they won't hit it straight. They'll strike the lunar shield array first. Take that down, and Earth's defenses will crumble like paper." Mara stared at the map, heart pounding. "If we lose the moon," she whispered. "We lose everything," Warden finished grimly. Hammer stepped forward, slamming her hammer's head into the deck for emphasis. "That's why we're not going to let 'em," she said, fire in her eyes. Mara looked at them, this motley crew of half-forgotten titans, and felt a strange, fierce hope burning in her chest. They were rough, brutal, half-wild, but they were humanity's best chance. Warden turned back to her. "We're moving in 2 hours," he said. "No backup, no cavalry, just us." "And me," Mara said firmly. Warden's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile or a warning. "Yeah," he rumbled. "You too, little soldier." The giants moved into action, prepping their brutal gear, checking their oversized weapons. Mara found herself swept up in their orbit, half terrified, half thrilled. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was part of something bigger, something ancient and furious, something humanity had buried because it was too dangerous to live with. And now they were setting it loose on the galaxy. 2 hours later, Mara found herself crammed inside a drop shuttle that felt more like a missile with seats. The giants barely fit. Hammer was hunched over, her huge hands gripping the restraints like she might rip them clean out of the wall. Rook sat cross-legged, his massive rifle resting across his knees. Grim stood, because no way was he folding himself into one of the seats, silently bracing against the hull. And Warden just stared straight ahead, helmet in his lap, his old eyes burning like coals. The shuttle rattled as it cut through the blackness of space. Ahead, the lunar shield array hung over the silver surface of the moon, 12 colossal towers linked by glowing energy lines. Right now, those shields kept Earth safe from orbital bombardment. But already Mara could see enemy ships swarming around the array, hammering the defenses with endless barrages. Fighters zipped back and forth like angry hornets. Explosions flared every few seconds. A voice crackled over the comms. "All units, this is command. Array breach in progress. Enemy forces penetrating outer defense lines. Immediate reinforcement requested. Repeat, immediate reinforcement requested." Mara tightened the straps of her harness and checked her rifle one last time. She wasn't going to sit this one out, even if she felt tiny compared to the monsters riding with her. The pilot's voice came over the cabin speakers. "Brace for combat drop in 30 seconds. The giants barely reacted. They just shifted slightly, like bears waking from a nap. Mara tried to slow her breathing, tried to quiet the voice in her head screaming, "You're about to die, you're about to die," but it didn't work. Instead, she focused on Warden, If he wasn't worried, neither was she. The light above the hatch turned red, then yellow, then green. The doors blew open with a scream of decompression, and the giants jumped. No fancy landers, no support teams, just them, hurtling through vacuum straight at the lunar array like falling gods. Mara unbuckled herself and sprinted after them, heart hammering. She'd been issued a mag-grav pack, ugly, heavy tech strapped to her back, that let her steer her fall. Barely. She tumbled through the void, Earth rising huge and blue behind her, gunfire lighting up the moon's surface below. She could see the battlefield now, enemy infantry swarming across the array's control towers, defense turrets firing blindly into the night, human soldiers pinned down, outnumbered, outgunned. It was a massacre, until the giants hit the ground. Warden slammed down like a meteor, landing on a squad of enemy soldiers and sending bodies flying. Hammer crashed through the roof of one of the shield generators, roaring like a beast, her weapon swinging in brutal arcs. Grim touched down near a group of pinned human defenders and opened up with his massive twin gun, mowing down the enemy like wheat before a thresher. Rook landed last, rolling to absorb the impact, coming up with a grin on his scarred face and a plasma cannon bigger than Mara strapped to his back. And Mara hit hard, the grav pack nearly snapping her spine, but she rolled, came up firing, teeth bared in a snarl. The battlefield was chaos. Enemy forces turned in panic, screaming orders in their clicking insectile language. Plasma bolts flashed everywhere, explosions ripped the air apart, but the giants moved like avatars of destruction. Hammer charged into a tower's base, smashing supports with her weapon, bringing the whole structure down onto a squad of invaders. Grim knelt beside a human platoon, providing brutal cover fire as they scrambled for safer ground. Warden, slow and steady, waded through the enemy like a reaper through a cornfield, every punch sending bodies flying, every step shaking the lunar soil. Mara fought too. Smaller, faster, darting between wreckage, taking out enemy officers, calling positions to the giants over the comms. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was part of the damn fight. Above them, one of the array's main towers shuddered under a fresh wave of enemy bombardment. Its energy shield flickered dangerously. Mara's comm crackled. "This is Shield Command. Critical damage. Repeat, critical damage. If that tower falls, the array's going offline." Warden growled low over the team channel. "On it." He pointed to Mara. "With me. Now." Without thinking, she ran after him, heart in her throat. They charged up the broken slope of the tower's outer defenses, enemy fire hammering around them. Grim and Rook covered them, raining destruction from behind. Hammer broke off, charging toward an enemy artillery position that was chewing up the remaining defenses. Mara skidded behind Warden, following his massive frame as he smashed through the tower's front gates with his bare hands. Inside, it was worse. Enemy troops crawling over the control nodes like termites, tearing apart the shield systems. Warden didn't hesitate. He roared, a sound so deep it made Mara's bones vibrate, and tore into them. Mara backed him up, shooting anything that moved, dropping grenades into clusters of enemy engineers, holding the stairwells. Her rifle overheated twice, but she kept moving, kept fighting. They fought their way to the tower's core. And there, standing over the shield generator, was something different. A tall alien commander, wrapped in black armor, holding a weapon Mara had never seen before, a twisted, jagged staff pulsing with dark energy. The alien turned, eyes glowing with hate. Warden let out a low snarl. "You!" he growled. "You're the one behind this?" The alien commander smiled, a horrible, knowing smile, and raised the staff. The real fight was just beginning. The alien commander moved first, faster than anything that size should have been able to. The dark staff slashed through the air, sending a shockwave of energy screaming toward them. Warden shoved Mara aside without hesitation, planting himself directly in the path of the attack. The blast hit him square in the chest, knocking him back a step, but only a step. He straightened slowly, steam rising from his battered armor. And he smiled. It was the kind of smile that promised someone was about to die. Mara scrambled to her feet, heart pounding so hard she could barely think. Her rifle was fried from overuse, useless now, but she drew her sidearm, hands steady through sheer force of will. She knew she couldn't take that alien in a straight fight, but she wasn't going to stand there doing nothing. Warden rolled his massive shoulders, letting out a low, rumbling growl that filled the ruined tower chamber. The alien hissed something in its harsh tongue, the staff flaring with pulsing black light. Then Warden charged. It was like watching a mountain come alive. He hit the alien with a shoulder smash that cracked the floor beneath their feet. The staff clanged to the side as Warden grabbed the commander and hurled him through a reinforced console like it was cardboard. Mara moved, firing shot after shot into enemy troops still clustered around the generator. They were trying to overload it, trying to bring the whole shield down manually now that their leader was busy. "Cover the core," Warden barked over the comms, not looking away from the commander struggling to rise. Mara threw herself into it, diving behind the generator, using every dirty trick she knew, kicking out knees, firing point blank, smashing skulls with the butt of her pistol. Warden and the commander clashed again, brutal and ugly. The alien staff lashed out, scoring deep gouges in Warden's armor, but Warden answered with his fists, massive, unstoppable. He fought like he didn't care about pain anymore, like he had made peace with it a long time ago. The whole tower shook with the force of their battle. Outside, Mara could hear Hammer over the comms, shouting in triumph as she destroyed the artillery positions. Grimm's voice was calm and cold, reporting kill counts as he laid down suppressive fire. Rook's laughter echoed like a wild thing. They were winning. They just had to survive a little longer. The alien commander twisted, pulling something small and sharp from its belt. A grenade, shaped like a jagged crystal. It flashed blood red in its hand. Mara's heart stopped. He's going to blow the core. Without thinking, she sprinted forward past burning wreckage and pools of blood, shouting at the top of her lungs. "Warden, grenade!" Warden didn't hesitate. In one brutal motion, he grabbed the alien by the throat, lifted him clean off the ground, and threw him straight up into the air. The alien detonated mid-flight, a brilliant crimson flare lighting the shattered tower. Shards of black armor rained down like ash. But the blast rocked the whole structure. Cracks spiderwebbed across the shield generator. Systems screamed alarms in a dozen languages. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it had wounded it badly. Mara skidded to the generator, heart racing, slamming into the control panels, trying to override the meltdown sequence. Come on," she muttered, fingers flying across the keys. Warden stomped over, his armor smoking, blood dripping from a dozen shallow cuts. "Can you stop it?" he growled. Mara shook her head grimly. "Not for long. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe less." Warden didn't even blink. "That's enough," he said. He turned back toward the shattered doorway, where the remaining enemy forces were regrouping outside. Reinforcements, no doubt, called by the explosion. He looked at Mara. "You stay with the core. You keep it alive." His voice was pure iron. "We'll hold them." Mara wanted to argue, wanted to say it was suicide, but the look in Warden's eyes, the sheer, immovable will, silenced her. She nodded once. "I'll hold," she said. Warden gave a sharp, satisfied nod. Then he keyed the team communication. "All Titans, rally on me, last stand." Hammer's voice cracked over the channel, fierce and exultant. "Hell yes!" Grimm's cold, flat. "Affirmative." Rook's wild cackle. Time to break some bones. Mara turned back to the console, fingers flying again, trying to patch the worst of the damage. Behind her, she heard the giants moving into position. Heavy steps, weapons priming, low mutters of promises made and blood debts owed. And when the enemy stormed the tower again, they found not a broken, desperate handful of survivors. They found the monsters of Earth's past, standing tall, defiant, unbreakable, ready to buy humanity's future with blood if they had to. The first wave of enemies hit like a hammer. Mara barely looked up from the generator console. She had her orders, and she would follow them. But the sounds around her were impossible to ignore. The ground shook with every step Warden took. Plasma fire crackled, explosions thudded against the reinforced walls, and the Titans roared back with brutal, bone-shaking violence. Hammer led the charge, her weapon spinning in savage arcs, every blow flattening squads of enemy soldiers like they were nothing. Grim fired in short, deafening bursts, cutting through armor and flesh with ruthless efficiency. Rook barreled through the enemy ranks, laughing like a lunatic, swinging a massive blade torn straight from a wrecked alien walker. And Warden fought like death itself. Mara risked a glance back, and what she saw would stay with her forever. The enemy had numbers, speed, technology, but the giants had rage, will, purpose. They were humanity's answer to a galaxy that thought it could burn them out of existence, and they weren't losing. Yet. The generator behind Mara gave a warning shriek. Systems failing, heat building. She swore under her breath, fingers flying faster, patching, rerouting, praying. 2 minutes, she shouted into the comms. Warden caught her eye across the chaos. He nodded once, calm, certain. He wasn't planning to survive this. None of them were. The enemy changed tactics. New elites poured in, sleek, black-armored assassins, moving like liquid death. They cut down 2 human defenders before Mara even registered their arrival. Hammer saw them first. "Stay on the core!" she bellowed at Mara. Then she charged. One by one, the giants intercepted the elites. Grimm took 3 shots to the chest and still kept coming. Rook lost an arm at the elbow to a plasma blade, but roared with laughter and beat his attacker to death with the stump. And Hammer fought like the earth itself was angry through her. But it wasn't enough. The elites moved faster, tighter. They didn't fight to win the battle. They fought to reach the generator, to finish what their dead commander had started. Mara fired every shot she had, emptying her sidearm, grabbing a fallen rifle, burning her hands as she kept firing. But more and more of them slipped past. Too many. Too fast. Warden saw it, too, and he made a decision. He turned away from the fight, sprinting toward Mara, scooping her up under one massive arm like she weighed nothing. "What are you?" she gasped, struggling. He didn't answer. He ran, straight to the generator core. With his free hand, he punched through the control panel, into the pulsing, wounded heart of the shield system. Sparks showered down around them. "Warden, no!" Mara screamed, finally understanding. He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw something gentler in his eyes. Regret, pride, maybe even hope. "Monsters built to fight," he said, voice a low rumble. "But still human, always human." Then he shoved her away, hard, sending her sprawling toward the far wall. Before she could scramble back up, Warden stepped into the generator's core. The system reacted instantly, feeding on his bioelectric field, his enhanced body, his sheer, impossible will. The shields flared back to full strength in a sudden, blinding wave, burning through enemy troops like a cleansing fire. The explosion that followed wasn't a blast, it was a birth. Light erupted from the tower, a pillar of raw energy that tore through the enemy fleet orbiting the moon, frying circuits, blinding sensors, shattering ships like glass. Every soldier on the battlefield stopped and stared, human, alien, giant alike, frozen by the sheer impossible sight. Earth's shield was alive again, stronger than ever, and Warden was gone. Mara lay there, stunned, as the last enemy troops broke and fled, scattering like insects before a flood. The giants stood in the wreckage, battered, bleeding, alive. Hammer dropped her hammer to the ground, the weapon landing with a final, exhausted clang. Grim knelt beside the spot where Warden had disappeared, bowing his head. Rook just stared at the sky, silent for the first time Mara had ever seen. Mara rose slowly, heart broken and full at the same time. She limped forward, reaching out a shaking hand to the place where Warden had stood. The heat was fading. The power was still humming. He had saved them. He had saved everyone. A crackle came over the wideband comms. Earth Command to Lunar Defense. Shield confirmed active. Enemy fleet retreating. I repeat, enemy fleet is retreating. Cheers erupted through the human forces. Soldiers wept openly, hugging each other, screaming in disbelief and joy. Mara just stood there, letting the tears stream down her soot-streaked face. For Warden. For all of them. Hammer came to her side, laying a heavy, scarred hand on her shoulder. "He chose it," she said quietly. "His way." Mara nodded. "He was human," she whispered. "The best of us." The giants gathered around her, battered and bloodied, but alive. They weren't myths anymore. They weren't monsters. They were the guardians of Earth. And now the galaxy knew. You can bomb our worlds. You can burn our homes. You can even try to erase our name. But when you push humanity too far, our giants will answer, and they will not be stopped.